Power of the Jedi was a landmark line in the modern Star Wars collecting series, world, adventure. Well, whatever it was, Power of the Jedi was the first time we got figures from classic trilogy and prequels. Well, at the time we only had one prequel, Episode 1. Heck, they even had Episode 1 concept figures and off-screen characters thrown in there. It was all about merging Episode 1 and Power of the Force 2 after the Episode 1 figures didn't do too well in the second year, and that gave us kind of a 50-50 split of Episode 1 and classic trilogy. Well, a funny thing happened after Power of the Jedi, Episode 2. There were more prequels, and instead of having a dedicated Episode 2 line, it was again now going to be an all-encompassing Star Wars line, but the first time that a new movie release didn't have its own line, since Phantom Menace Episode 1 had a dedicated line. So we were going to get characters from Episode 1, Episode 2, and the original trilogy now all on one branded package, which was definitely a landmark in the overall adventure. There we go, the adventure of collecting Star Wars toys. Let's use that one. So while we did get a lot of Episode 2 characters in the what's now called Star Wars Saga Blue Card series, because this would get reworked with gold-themed, or rather boarded packaging in a few years, the Blue series did give us still quite a few classic trilogy figures. They were more or less shuffled in there along with the majority of Episode 2 figures, since obviously Episode 2, being the new content, was going to be the lead and the reason for retail to order product in bulk. In fact, I remember these figures had practically their own aisle. It was like 8-9 feet of just basic figures when Episode 2 launched. Now, it introduced a lot of things like action poses and action features, which we hadn't seen before, both in terms of a, well, basic figure. There were deluxe figures that had light-up accessories or other different, missile firing mechanisms. But for the first time, we were going to get lightsaber striking action and spear stabbing action and less violent missile firing jetpack. Okay, they were all violent sounding. But, kids like violence. What can we say? And I could understand, because with the whole idea of bringing action back to action figures, well, with the type of figures that were out there at the time, I could understand why this might be appealing, although I just can't stand that positioning line. One of the other unique things about the Blue Saga carded figures, Saga, tomato, is a lot of them used magnets as part of their action feature, which tend to be shunned by the toy industry due to the danger.
Always with the magnets.
But like I said, Episode 2 was by far the focus of this line, and really the bulk of the initial offerings were all themed to the new content. Again, that's how product line gets placed at retail. But it took all the way until, figure 29, I want to say it is, that we finally got a classic trilogy figure, but it showed that they would show up. Now, there were figures that could be interpreted as classic trilogy, and in fact, I did a whole video on this a while back. Maybe I'll link it at the end of this one. But there were characters now in prequels that were also in the original trilogy. So do they count as original trilogy? Do they count as prequel? I guess that is a whole other YouTube video, and it is. But this was the line that gave us that. All right, so back to the clear original trilogy figures, Vader and Luke there. And, well, for original trilogy collectors, this was now going to be a reason to rejoice. And these were some really great figures. I mean, piece count alone. Bespin Luke is obviously a character that we've seen a lot, even though he's not on the top 3 Luke list from Lucasfilm. That would be X-Wing, White, Tatooine, and Dark Jedi. But Bespin Luke is still one that sells really well, and the figure that we got in Power of the Force 2 did have a little bit of an action feature in the sense that his arm was not only articulated, so that you could get more lightsaber poses, but it did come off. Well, it wasn't articulated. It spun around because it was a separate piece. But hey, articulation counts. But what they were really going for was this, that it had a removable hand. Whether or not that's an action feature, this figure, well, it did. Not only did the hand come off and on with the use of magnets, but boy, look at the deco alone. They just don't make toys like this anymore. And the accessories, the price value, you got the entire weather vane with a suction cup, so you could position it in multiple different ways for display. The dust, the grime, deco on the accessories, blood on the hand and the face. In fact, there was actually a need to tone this down, which is why the figure had a running change, and it also changed how the magnet attached, originally being in the wrist and then changed to the removable hand. They both worked exactly the same way, that the hand would, well, hold in via a magnet instead of a peg, which again, magnets are dangerous in the toy industry. I'm still shocked that they went in this direction. But yeah, there would also be a total repaint of this figure as a part of a Father's Day set. Well, I was like Luke, I Am Your Father's Day, I think it was called. We'll get to it in time, but it was a repaint of this figure without any blood. And though it kept the fun of the magnet, so hey, magnets are magnets. A great figure though, and complementing this figure, obviously the character that was part of the showdown, it makes sense to also release Darth Vader. I mean, Darth Vader always sells, like always. And this is interesting because this is this Vader, like this moment right here. Luke, I am your father. No, actually, it's Luke. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. Anyway, it's always one of those misquoted lines. The point is, the Vaders that we'd had in the past were specific to movies. Episode 4, Episode 3, Episode 6. This was the first time we were now getting a Darth Vader that was specific to a moment in time. And I think with as far and as deep as we are now, this is a great way to go with a toy line that has so many, if you will, there's so many versions of Vader out there doing ones that are literally capturing an exact, almost screen still. I think is fantastic. So whether you're slashing through the, I guess, beams or, reaching out to Luke, this Vader, captures a moment in the film. And I think that's a really cool thing. It's one of the first times we really truly got that. And again, the piece count. We were in a really nice time with the Saga series, and the great part was, for collectors, it was only just beginning.